Welcome back to Loyalty Leaders Podcast. I'm David Feldman, chair of Loyalty Summit, and I'm joined today by Matthijs Kooijman from Attached Language. Matthijs, no stranger to Loyalty Summit. Those who've attended before will have seen the two of us chatting previously, and you'll be joining us in Chicago in a couple of weeks on September 17, 18. Do you just want to maybe quickly introduce yourself for those who might not have met you before?
Yeah, I'm Matthijs. You may know me as the tall, bull Dutch guy who speaks too loud at these conferences. I'm with Attached Language. We've been around for more than 20 years. We used to be what you call a traditional translation agency, but due to our affiliation with Air France KLM, we have been involved within the loyalty industry for more than 10 years. We do translation in more than 35 languages for Flying Blue, Norwegian Rewards. We work very closely with Points and Plus Grade. We do a lot of work for Value Dynamics, for SkyTeam, etc. So coming to the Loyalty Summit for me is like coming home, because I see a lot of my clients over there and I talk to them and I can exchange information with them.
And Matthijs, when you would talk about sort of translation, we're talking about, we talk a lot in loyalty programs, whether your loyalty program is very homogenous in terms of its audience, local audience, perhaps single language, let's say you're in the US and you just have a US based audience, you perhaps aren't, thinking too much about that. If you're in Canada, but everything has to be bilingual. If you're in Europe, chances are you'll probably, have customers, across boundaries and language and cultural areas, and likewise other regions around the world. When we talk about localization or, regional approaches to personalization with customers, everyone thinks about translations, but there's a lot more we need to think about, isn't it? Besides just translations, right?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite sayings is that when you speak to a man in a language that he understands, it will go to his head. But if you speak to a man in his own language, it will go to his heart. And since loyalty is basically about personalization, about heart, about getting into the heart of your clients, because you want their loyalty, which is an emotion, language is an extremely important way to make that connection with them. And that's what we basically do at Attached for our clients. We not only make sure that the program members actually understand what the loyalty program is about, because if it's written in English and you're from Italy or German, it can be quite complicating. But maybe even more important, and that's where Attached distinguishes herself, is that we make sure that the loyalty program can show their customers that they actually understand them by using their own language.
When you think about, again, so when we think about that, and the average loyalty manager, perhaps, is, quite, familiar with, hey, I'm going to launch a promotion next month. My audiences are in these markets. Obviously I need to get translations done. Can you share any sort of examples or anecdotes, not sort of putting Attached on the spot here, but just in your time in the industry, in terms of, perhaps where there's been a bit of a disconnect, between the program or the goals of the loyalty manager, and sort of the delivery, because, you sort of made a comment earlier with your little saying there, in terms of the customer understanding the language versus it being their language, perhaps, literally or not literally. Any sort of funny examples or anecdotes that sort of guide you?
The strange thing is, and this is what I used to discuss, for example, with Rob McLean from Points, is that through their loyalty product, they might be communicating with hundreds of millions of people. And they're basically feeding them they are all feeding them the same line in a couple of languages. Which, of course, when you think about it longer than 3 seconds, is a totally missed chance, because not only every market needs its own language, but every tier should have their own language. And so we not just translate from English into French, or English into French for Canada, French for France, French for Belgium. But we translate into French for Belgium for business travelers, French for Canada for elderly travelers. Because not only is there a difference between these types of French, but the whole way why and how a person travels or is member of a loyalty program differs per tier, per age, per whatever. And my father doesn't understand my daughter because they are actually speaking the same language, but the lingo is different. And that's when you get that right as a loyalty program, you will have such a higher rate of conversion and retention because you show the people that they care. Every person in this world wants to be acknowledged, wants to be seen as a client. And again, after spelling your name right, having your language right is a fantastic revenue driver because it creates real loyalty with people.
So, no, so continue, please continue.
So language, words have long been seen as a commodity. Language was a mean to bridge a language barrier. But it goes far beyond that. Language can be used specifically within lawyer programs to attract people, to get people in. And when you keep treating it as a commodity, you get situations where, for example, and admittingly, this is much more important in the South American and European market, which it's different culture than in America. But for example, Dutch is spoken in Holland, the Netherlands, and Belgium. So a lot of cheap Dutch companies will say, well, just leave it into Dutch for Belgium. They understand it. But a Dutch-speaking Belgian person will actively not buy a product if he sees that it's really Dutch, if it doesn't has his own nuance, because he considers Dutch people as being arrogant. The same goes to a certain extent in South America. If you use Spanish for Argentina, for Mexicans, the conversion will be much, much lower than if you spend a little more investment in getting it right for Mexican people. So that's basically what we try to do. And for your anecdotes, the companies that basically are using language as a commodity are very fond of sending us Excel sheets with words, columns with words. I never get tired of pointing out to people that Excel is a spreadsheet, is as much a word processor as Word is a calculation model. But apparently this works for a lot of companies. So we get lists of words and nobody has time to create for us the context, what the word actually is. So you come up with great surprises like the word play. Do you know how many meanings the word play has in various languages?
More than obviously I'm thinking about.
Exactly. So for example, it has happened that the word play was translated into a different language as drama. So instead of press play in a certain language, you will get press drama, which doesn't make sense. And in this case, it's kind of it's not really a problem. But I once tried to access an app that was launched to be the big competitor to Booking.com and Expedia. And in Dutch, it said clear, as in evident. It used the word evident. So I typed in all the stuff that you need to type in. Where do you want to stay? How long? Blah, 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 blah. And then I pressed evident and it all disappeared. So I thought, goodness me, I try again. So I filled out everything. It took 5 minutes and I played evident as in, is it clear? Yes, it is clear. But apparently clear means delete. So I threw the app away after trying 2 times. And then you get to the point, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And what I say, with Tinder pace, people will run from your page and will never return again. So that's one of the examples. One of my other fun examples about how English-oriented people are in the loyalty industry or in the app development, is that at a certain point there was this special action campaign towards a new destination in Sweden called a town called Växjö, and of course they want to fill their planes. So within the loyalty program, there was a special campaign designed to get people flying to this town in Sweden. So the slogan they came up with was Växjö, which is the name of the town, easy to love, hard to pronounce. And then some intern sent us an email, hi, translate this into 22 languages, please. And then we have to point out to them that to their Scandinavian markets, Växjö isn't really hard to pronounce. It's basically their language. And it's kind of insulting if you use this slogan. And then we said, where do you want to use it? Yeah, it's in the app at this page. I said, we had to point out to them that probably people will stay 1 second at that specific thing in the app. So you have to make it shorter. And then our servers transcreation come in. So we stop literally translating something, but we try to translate the idea, the gist of the meaning into what suits that market. And that's what really distinguishes ourselves. Sorry. Yeah.
No. I was going to say, I mean, I think this is a really good point that you're making, is that, you know, I know you sort of mentioned translation as commodity, but I think it's a concept that loyalty managers really need to sort of understand. And that is that, yes, you can translate words, you know, which is, as you say, it's very much a commodity, you know, this word equals this word in this language equals this word in this language. But notwithstanding, you know, let's make sure we understand exactly the usage of the word so we get the correct translation. But really what we, you know, again, it's a two-directional discussion that you have with programs. And loyalty managers need to understand this, is it's not just about translating the words. It's about understanding your message and understanding the message, or as you say, the gist that you want to convey to your members in various markets, perhaps various tiers, perhaps various sub-segments, and the segments might not be the same in every market. For example, even if you talk about tiers, in your home market, you're going to have a lot more concentration of higher level of tier members than you are, for example, in remote markets.
Exactly.
But if you're an airline, that's not necessarily true in all cases, because you may have a major hub in one specific remote market that you don't have in the next door market. And that one is going to have a very different distribution of tiers. So even in that, it's a case of you really need to understand every market is different. And if you want to get the commodity of translation right, you need to, you need to kind of back up a bit and make sure you get the messaging and the gist right for each of those markets. And that's a much bigger task for a loyalty manager than simply, as you sort of say, have the intern send out a list of the translation requirements. I mean, I'm like, is that a good summary of sort of some of those key
That's
points?
a good summary. And I will tell you something. I will not name the name of that specific airline, but there is this well-renowned airline that approached me during one of the loyalty summits, and they said, listen, what we don't understand is that the brands that you're working for, in this case Flying Blue, Norwegian Rewards, and a couple of the Points Plus grade programs, they win these awards and they have this fun stuff. And when I hire very expensive advertising agencies and copywriters to get distinguished, differentiating copy for us, a very creative process. I pay these people a lot of money. And the feedback I get from the local markets after translation is that it doesn't differentiate at all from my competitors. Mm-hmm. So it's literally lost in translation. Do you know how that happens? I said, yes, I do know how this happens. Because your procurement officer went for the lowest bidder, who uses a lot of software that he will use as what you call translation memories, where they stock all kinds of earlier translated material. And they will probably use it for you and your competitors. Mm. So the same terminology, the same stuff, and the same lack of translating humor or smart
Mhm.
language or really local lingo is eased out in this process. And this is a nice bridge to AI, because this is, of course, sometimes what happens with AI. It basically pumps around existing content in a different order.
It's an interesting point. Just going back a step. I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
I'm Australian. And yes, in under Microsoft definition, we have Australian English, sure, but realistically, it's British English, right?
yeah,
Which means British, Australian, New Zealand. Effectively, we all talk the same language. Um, you know, as distinct from American English.
yes,
So
yeah,
we have British English. We have the same spellings. We have you in the word color, for example.
yeah,
Those little things like that. So you would think that translating from British to an Australian or New Zealand market, for example, should be straightforward. But the reality is that an Australian reader will instantly pick up on
exactly. Yeah,
this is British,
exactly.
or and even between Australia and New Zealand, some subtle differences.
Yeah,
The choice of words that might be used.
yeah,
So it's not just about translating, say, from English to French or to Spanish, or as you say, sort of from Dutch Holland to Dutch Belgium. The there even in English there is local subtleties that a local customer would and maybe they don't even consciously say this is British, but they'll read it and it won't speak to them. So I think that
exactly.
there's a good takeaway from that. But you bring up AI, and that's good because I actually wanted to ask you about AI, and I know we've talked about this before,
Yeah,
but obviously at Lordy Summit, it is a huge topic. New technology, it always has been. New
yeah,
technology. How do we leverage technology in our Lordy programs? And again, if you're a Lordy program manager, you have a huge job. Not just even strategically in terms of where your program is going or redesigning your program or how to engage your members, just day-to-day operationally, you have to talk to millions of members, different market segments, different market locations, and obviously you use technology to do that. So it's of interest when we think about new technologies, whether it's AI or machine learning, or even just, having a Lordy management platform that allows you the functionality that you want to use. But AI is very topical right now.
yeah,
And some people would, suggest that, AI is going to make tasks like this much easier. But you brought up a good point. And that is that AI really is at its core a database of information, isn't it? So if the data repository that the AI is basing its own learnings on is outdated or wrong, or doesn't have the level of depth of nuance, it's going to keep spitting out the same wrong answers, right?
yeah.
So
AI.
how should a Lordy program manager think about that? And this is sort of why I'm asking you to sort of look into the crystal ball a little bit. As we move forward, and obviously the pace of technological development has never been faster, and it will only continue in that regard. Where do you see us going? In terms of as a Lordy program manager, how should you be thinking about this in the next 12, 24 months?
AI has been around in translation for a long time, as a supporting software in order to get the terminology right, in order to create what you call translation memories, which are used basically to check new content with old content. So you guarantee continuity and consistency in the word use. It has been used as creating terminology bases that you use the right terminology for each client. For example, if a company wants their users to be called client, they will be called client. Sometimes that leads to an internal discussion whether you should customer, client, participant, member, whatever, etc. But once the term is set on, we will store that for you. Well, so AI is no stranger for us as a supporting software to help to make our work easier. What now has happened with the developments in AI is that it has become a provider in itself to some people, to some companies who basically say, my goodness, the scalability of this is so huge. It's faster. It's quick. It can handle huge volumes. The time to market is pretty quick. And hey, it costs nearly to nothing. I only become a member. By the way, if you use free translation tools, you pay with your privacy and probably are at odds with your own compliance regulations in your company. But this is something else. But if you have a paid version of either it's ChatGPT or one of the other large language programs, it kind of tempts you to create more content and more output. And then indeed some other challenge. So it solves a couple of problems, but it creates different challenges. And one of them is the validation of the texts that come out. Does this make sense? Is the translation actually saying what we wanted to say? And again, if you have some interns who speak French or German or Italian, you can sometimes check yourself. But if it's about some more exotic languages, who is checking this? So one of the gurus in localization had this great saying. He said, I used to be selling words for 18 cents per word. Now I'm selling insurance for 18 cents per word because somebody needs to check if it makes sense. So that's a shift in your service. The shift that we are making is very much where we used to give away everything we knew about localization in order to sell words. Now we start giving away the words, but we are selling everything we know about localization, translation, transcreation, international SEO, because that is where the dots that need to be connected in this extremely expanding translation environment are enormous. So we are sometimes acting as traffic managers for large loyalty programs in order to get the right translation on the right page, in the right distribution channel, in the right market. So that's a shift, and that's a development that's going on. And that creates a new spot for us where we more become consultants and sit down with our partners to discuss which content do you want to have localized in what way. So because you have the opportunity with AI to translate everything very quickly. So what do you want to focus on? What do you want to be better or more in depth or more creative? And that's where we start playing an important role. Also, for example, in the development of applications and apps, where basically when it used to be the procedure that people developed an app, it costs tons of money and tons of time. And when it's finished, somebody at the table said at the last minute, by the way, how we are going to translate it. And then they found out that Italian uses 30% more space than English, and that Polish and Russian have multiple forms of saying a lot of stuff, so that the app doesn't work. Now we are invited, for example, again by points and plus grade, to be involved at the start of the development of a service, where they basically ask, listen, this is our idea. We need to localize this into the 39 languages. What do you think? And that's the development that I love from having AI around. So we don't see it as a competitor. We see it as a very helpful tool to our network of 1,500 translators all over the world. Sometimes, and we, together with the client, discuss how we are going to use the AI in conveying their message.
And I think it's a good takeaway, right? I mean, again, I sort of the theme that I've taken in from our conversation today, is that the worst thing you can do is to treat localization as a simply a translation commodity. And when we talk about AI, really we're just talking about the approach and the process. I mean, yes, AI tools and certainly the speed of development of technology can speed up the delivery of what you're looking for with your localization goals and process, and strategies.
Exactly, and David, that's where still a lot of ground is to be won in the awareness of. Again, it's in this case, it's not the CFO that you're always complaining about in the loyalty world, but it's the top management needs to understand the power of the revenue driving aspect of language, how it really, really, really can improve the involvement in your language program.
Matthijs, you're going to be joining us in Chicago in a couple of weeks on September 17th, 18th, correct?
Excellent.
I'm very much looking forward to continuing our conversation. I'm sure people will have questions, and we can delve into this topic a little bit more. But this is absolutely fascinating, both in terms of just from the loyalty program manager's understanding in terms of how do I correctly message? What is the right approach to talking to my members, my customers, my guests, my clients, whatever you want to call them, in whatever markets? But also, how do I leverage technology to do that? Whether it's when in conversations with my vendors or even just thinking about designing my communication strategies within my program, my life cycle strategies, things like that. This all feeds into this, particularly if you are in a market that is not just a very specific local home market where you actually need to be thinking about talking to different members that need to be spoken to in different ways. Matthijs, thanks so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks and continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much, David. I'll be seeing you in 2 weeks.
Very soon.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye now.